Yeah, in terms of why does intensity or intense experiences always tend to be recalled or remembered negatively? Why memory and desire seem to be obstacles? Because most of our memory and desire is of negative experiences, is of negative intensity, and how that prevents us from growing. Yes, that's a see, there are multiple issues here. For one, culturally and socially, there is a bias in that the more painful or the more difficult a situation, the more value is assigned to it. It's like in art today, you cannot really paint a conventionally beautiful thing, because that is not regarded as being authentic ever since Picasso painted his famous, the Picasso, Braque, and who was the third fellow in the Cubist? Yeah. So, so there is a sense in that the difficult, the harsh, the ugly, the painful, these are in some senses more authentic and more real and more evocative or more truthful a representation of reality as it is. And the beautiful, the pleasant, these are all regarded as somehow one sort of lower vibration, or somehow not having the same depth of penetration or not having the same extent of authenticity. This is true always. Whatever are called masterpieces usually seem to be all grim and foreboding. And one of the reasons why Game of Thrones is so popular is because absolutely anybody can get caught up in the mangler at any time, and it doesn't matter if you're a good or a bad person. And that sort of notion that this is how life actually is. So it goes to very deep level conditioning that people have, that societies have, that even consciousness seems to have, that unless bad things happen consistently, it is not real, it is not true. And unfortunately, the human being, the manava, Homo sapiens sapiens, the animal that is aware that it is aware, we are at our deepest core geared for authenticity. So if we accept that only the harsh and the painful and the dreadful is authentic, then we will keep manufacturing that. Which is why it's not common now, but it used to be very common that men would go off to war, and the people who used to be in the unit, the people who used to be in the brigade, the division, they would be their best friends for the rest of life, because they would live in that state of intensity when you are in a war zone. Today, because war has become so traumatic, most people come back with post-traumatic stress disorder. They don't come back with unit cohesion. But people have understood that the soldiers, they go through an experience of such intensity where, because the fact that you could die at any moment, it renders all your experiences very meaningful, very imprinting on your memory and your consciousness. I was seeing this documentary on the Battle of the Bulge in the Second World War. That was the last great Nazi counterattack. And they were talking to all the survivors. They were already very old men. And what I found interesting was they were all remembering the little things. They remember the snow, how it felt, how they would, how the snow would sound under their feet when they would walk. Yes, they had dreadful stories of seeing their friends have their heads shot off and everything, but these little details had imprinted themselves so deeply that experience of being alive in a situation like that had imprinted it so deeply on their mind that ever since that day, the rest of normal reality, or when they step out into a snowy day, that snowy day doesn't match up to that memory or doesn't match up to that to that imprinting, So very often what happens is, even though our situation has improved, we are having a better time of things today, we can not acknowledge that because the imprinting of whatever was that intense experience remains. And since we are not feeling that intensity in our current experience, we feel therefore that it is less than that previous memory of the intense experience, which is either something life-threatening or it is an intense emotional experience. And of all the intense emotional experiences, love is the strongest, and disappointed or frustrated or heartbreak aspect of love always leaves the greatest effect on people. So people draw the conclusions from that heartbreak is good for you, or it is necessary to have experienced that pain of loss. Again, this is all because of the social bias that we have. We have the bias that only the harsh and the painful are true, only the difficult and shattering are authentic. It's not true, but we have no habit of accepting the blissful and the pleasant as being equally imprinting. You have to train for that, because the aim of yoga is to reach not happiness, because happiness is very much dependent on external circumstances. The aim of yoga is to reach ananda, which is like an inexpressible joy of just being alive, just being in manifestation. So it's difficult because, like I said, the whole, every movie that you see, every book that you read, if it is supposed to be a masterpiece, just look at Leo Tolstoy's two masterpieces, Anna Karenina, War and Peace. 75% of both books are about negative situations. Yes, there are certain brilliant descriptions of peaceful times, calm times, happy times, and those are regarded as the pinnacles of novels, that the novelistic form, those are the pinnacles, and they are fundamentally negative. You look at somebody like Philip K. Dick, who's just like the greatest. I think 11 of his short stories were made into movies later, science fiction. Total Recall, that famous one, Blade Runner, all those, one man. And look what he makes. Dystopia, not utopia. The future is something where society is crumbling, where survival is. All these projections into the future, what seems to be gritty and realistic and authentic and valuable, they all seem to privilege the negative side. They all seem to privilege the painful side. It's too deep-seated now. It's too deep-seated now, and probably because the only societies that could provide safety to their citizens, for instance the Roman Empire, which for about 500 years did do so, it was pretty decent time to be a Roman citizen, but it was possible only under extremely brutal behavior, only under extremely totalitarian behavior, and only under a society of exploitation, slaves, gladiatorial contests, conquering other people. Both Caesar and Caesar wrote his commentaries, and the Emperor Trajan built this magnificent column which has got this rotatory panel of relief sculptures, and both of them, they invaded Gaul and Dacia because those people had gold and they wanted it. So this notion that what is valuable can only be protected by brutality, or what is valuable and what is safe can only be buffered by a whole aspect of unpleasant people doing nasty things for the greater good, that notion has never been seriously challenged. That notion has never been seriously challenged, and the problem is that the people who speak on behalf of positivity are usually such immature and deluded people that it has no credibility. The people who speak for the positivity, the people who speak for kindness, the people who speak not for brutality and hard-nosed realism all the time, they tend to be very immature people. They tend to have unrealistic views of the world. So we sort of back away from people like that because they cannot be regarded as adults. But what I am saying is it has never been tried. We have never tried. Can we reset people's expectations in that positive positive experiences become the most imprinting? Because if you ask the normal human being, even if you ask the abnormal or the exceptional human being, the most impactful experiences almost universally are negative and painful ones. Does joy not exist in life? Does happiness not exist in life? Beauty, pleasantness, do these things not exist in life? So this is something actually I've been struggling with for a long time, because the desire to be pragmatic and realistic completely overlooks things only because we do not value them. The weightage given in the psychology, the weightage given in the culture, even when people are going into therapy, they are encouraged to talk about their most painful experiences, and they talk it out, and you need to release that. And yes, of course it helps lots of people, but equally it damages enormous numbers of people. Because I have seen people in therapy, they've gone to therapists, they've done every kind of healing mechanism, but that central narrative, say for instance they were abused as a child, that central narrative becomes the personality. And nobody told them, stop repeating this story, because you're just deepening the grooves of habit, you're just deepening the neurological. Nobody has told them, okay, this happened, now what do you intend to do? How do you intend to grow from here? So this privileging of the negative, this privileging of the negative memory, the negative experience, and even the negative desire, because I spoke about desires which are external and accumulative, things which you just need to add on to yourself, and desires which come from the inside, things which prompt you to grow and which prompt you ultimately to transform. The notion of success is entirely in external terms, not what you know or what you've accomplished or done for the world, for your society, but how much you have in your bank, in your house, parked outside your. So this default setting of external accumulativeness is directly tied into that whole privileging of negativity. People don't realize that they're trying to run away by getting these things, or by adding more and more things. They're trying to run away from their memories. They're trying to run away from their constructs. Now there are many methods in yoga where you can go back to that past experience and heal it. I have seen that people are simply not willing to do so. I have stopped teaching those meditations. There are actual meditations where you can go back to that particular episode, whatever that episode was, and you can rerun it in a more optimal, and you can clear the memory, you can clear the pain, you can clear the karma, and then you can get on with it. People simply refuse to do it. because the conditioning is so deep. And I understood in the beginning, I used to be very contemptuous and angry with them, that they are in resistance, they are refusing to drop their pain, they are identified by their pain. But I realized it was not so, because that pain or that negative experience was the only real memory or the only real thing that they have of authenticity in their life. Even if it is a purely painful experience, even if it is a purely harsh and destructive and disintegrative experience, nevertheless it was true. And at our deepest level, we like the truth, we value the truth. Nobody is really proud of being known as a liar, even though everybody lies. Some people, they base their entire life on lying, but nobody is really proud of being a liar, because that sense of truth is so hardwired. Now, if your truth is only of painful and harsh things, or only of times when your ass got kicked or your heart got broken, which is normally the two kinds of memories, or of illness. Many people have that experience of coming out of an illness. The illness was the most significant thing that happened in their life. Life-threatening illness. If people recover from a life-threatening illness, it is almost inevitable that they come out as different people. They come out as transformed people. It's a common experience, we all know. And even Lance Armstrong, he was like just about the biggest asshole in the world, but his cancer, because he had that cancer and he fought against it, he raised $500 million for cancer prevention. All the cheating that he did and everything, all that was that external accumulation, name, fame, money. So that's why he cheated, but when that cancer happened, he couldn't walk away from that, because that is an internal, painful, authentic experience. And at least where he raised the money for cancer, he was not cheating. The problem is, because he's expected to be a hero, and then we find out that he was just doped up. But come on, the top 20 people in the sport were caught cheating. Just this one man miraculously sometimes does not happen to be caught cheating in cycling. I mean, come on, that was again childishness on our part, because we want that narrative, we want that heroic narrative. Unfortunately, it has only deepened people's cynicism, because the heroic narrative turned out to be entirely driven by masking drug taking. So I have not seen really anywhere except in yoga, and even in yoga it is not a primary aspect, because the aspect is normally about dropping things, releasing things. I have not seen any aspect in grounding people in joy. And that's not what we do to our kids also. Yeah, kids are naturally happy, but we are determined to make them serious. We are determined to make them realistic. You need to do this. There is a whole checklist of things you need to do, because otherwise you'll become a failure. And failure is entirely an aspect of. So in the sense of, does memory become a problem? Yes. If your memory is, does memory become a problem in transformation? Yes. If your memory privileges the solely negative, intense experience that you have, then of course. Which is why in a great many situations, in a great many process labs, everything, they actually put you into trouble, because that is your only acceptance of authenticity. Because you can't go to the loo, you think, oh, this must be a really valuable this must be a really valuable process. They are forcing me to struggle with my body. They are forcing me to endure discomfort and pain. If they would let you go whenever you wanted to the loo, you would not feel that same level of authenticity. It's that pathetic. So we have to work, I mean, at least people doing the breaths, because in the breaths, 8 spiritual breaths, it's very clear. Feeling happy, giving thanks. Feeling happy, giving thanks. Feeling happy, giving thanks. That's why I keep saying the 8 spiritual breaths are the Sri Yantram of sadhana, because What is not in the 8 spiritual breaths is not worth having. Everything sensible about sadhana is in there. And that is the core. In every single breath they insist on that. Why? Because they know people have this tendency to think that only the harsh and the difficult and the painful and the sorrowful. I remember a friend of mine, we love old Hindi songs, all the songs of the 60s, 50s, mid 50s to mid 70s. So one day we asked, do we have 10 positive songs? 10 songs that are positive from beginning to end. We couldn't find 10 songs. There must be thousands of songs in those time period. Lata, Asha, Mukesh, Rafi, Hemant Kumar, Manna Dey, Kishore Kumar, Mahendra Kapoor. Yes, it is the golden age of film music. We really couldn't find 10 positive songs. That kind of woke me up, because the innate conditioning is about being shattered. Now, yes, it helps sometimes if you're shattered. But is that an appropriate way? And as a consequence, this whole affirmations crowd and positive thinking crowd have gone the other extreme, where they refuse to accept that bad things can happen. I am saying no, bad things can happen, will happen. Again, in our affirmations, very, very astutely, they do not say no negative thought will enter my mind. No negativity will remain in my memory. It is when it goes into the memory. As long as it is your experience, you're done with it, you move forward. You cannot prevent bad things from happening, but if it goes into the memory, because the memory in yoga is well understood as a deeper layer of consciousness than even your dreams. That is why very astutely in the affirmation it is said, no bad thing will enter my memory. It's a whole elaborate affirmation there, yes? This is why, because in the breaths only I am saying, that is why I keep saying this is the most extraordinary sadhana I have seen, because it understands that core business of people. It understands that core business that people will always make the blunder of thinking that the negative intensity is the only kind of intensity. People actually tell me, you're a yogi, you shouldn't laugh so much. Apparently, your credibility as a yogi becomes serious if you're grim and unsmiling. If joy comes up authentically in the process, that is regarded as less credible. Can you imagine? That is how bad. I've been told this on a regular basis. Why do you laugh so much? Like, I don't choose to laugh. It just happens, The joy is rising up and it reveals itself. That is not regarded. Now, if you would be all, which is why, the sort of princes of the church, as you would call it, the people in the formal hierarchies of religion, they all look constipated. Because that expectation of seriousness. Desire is a more tricky thing. Because life cannot go on without desire. That is well known. It is your desire that keeps your prana shakti, that keeps your life energies going forward, moving forward. So again, desires are accumulative types or transformative types. And as long as you have, see, especially if you become enlightened and liberated, it's very, very difficult to stay in the body. Then your body becomes like a miserable cage to you, and the feeling is, why live in this limitation? So they have to keep doing little tricks, and those tricks are all creating desires, because if you have a desire, then you need to fulfill it. It is a yogic understanding. So in many schools, they correctly tell you, do not increase your desires. Again, if it is an authentic school, they never tell you don't have any desires, because that is just about the most stupid and cruel thing you can tell another human being. I get very angry when I hear that. Yes, it is true, don't increase your desires, because we all have a checklist. We all have a checklist of things that we would like to have in our life, and if that checklist is already in your consciousness, this lifetime or some other lifetime, it has to be. Don't increase it. So when Yogananda used to see his disciples admiring the Ferrari, he would give them one whack on the head. So he's like, now you've sent that into your consciousness, and you'll have to create life circumstances to enjoy that. Don't do that. Now, see, the deepest, Osho had this somewhat cynical statement, but I realized as usual he was being wise, where he used to say, no matter what they say it is always about money. And no matter what they are talking about, they are always talking about sex. So these two desires, because they are the two lower chakras, these two desires are the two lowest chakras, Muladhara and Swadhisthana, and they are survival desires. They are desires for safety, security, propagation. So these two desires unfortunately cause the greatest problem, because people have a sort of expectation as to what kind of financial level is enough. Some people never come to the enough state. People have an expectation of what kind of relationship they should have, or they get fixated onto particular manner of relationship. If it doesn't play out that way, no matter how wonderful other relationships could be, they will refuse to accept it, because that fixation of desire, when it goes into extreme cases, it is called monomania. Now, I am the last person to say one should not have desire and one should not become fixated, because if I didn't have that, the Sacred India Tarot I could have never created. I just went into Zid, that stubbornness, that I will make this happen, because everybody was telling me, you're insane. A project like this can never be done in India. It can never be. So sometimes certain spectacular things can happen only when a person refuses to accept all the normal parameters of limitation. But very often it is not that. Very often the desire becomes stuck at a stage of development, at a stage of psychological development. You have actually grown much beyond that. But that desire still in your mind somewhere is the epitome of what will make you happy. Now I have seen this, people, they want a particular kind of car, or they want a particular kind of house, or they want a particular person, or a particular type of person, let us say. Most people are not that. And no matter what comes, or what is given, or what is experienced, since it does not perfectly overlap with that thought that they had maybe 10 years back, they refuse to be in any way happy or even grateful for what is currently on their plate. And that is, again, I used to be very scornful of people like that. I would say that they are immature. They are refusing to grow up. But I don't think so. I think they are not aware that the consciousness has shifted. And this is one of the commonest ironies of life, that you brood and dream about something. When you get it, you're like, this didn't turn out the way I expected. Not because the value it was giving is suddenly less or you were cheated. It's only you are now at a different state of consciousness. And you don't have that awareness that I am now at a different state of consciousness. Because the minute you have that awareness, that thing drops. So, uh, of course, I'm a great believer in writing down your goals, because, there is some kind of odd power in that. You just pick up what you've written 3 years, 4 years back, and you'll be shocked. At least 70-80% of the stuff, merely because you went to the trouble of writing it down, manifests. Your entire consciousness starts shifting. It's a sort of commitment you make to yourself. But sometimes you look at that list and you look at something that is on your goals list and you're like, what on earth? Why did I ever have this? Because at that moment, your shifted consciousness has enabled you to see that this is no longer something that is in my memory or in my need or in my desire. It's just something that is irrelevant now. So a large part of yoga is raising your consciousness so that only transformative desires remain and accumulative desires go. And I went back and I looked at the list, because I've been doing this goals business for a long time, and I realized that always the stuff I cross out is accumulative desire. Now, of course, you have to decide what is, if you have a family, then certain level of financial comfort and all that is mandatory. It's not an accumulative desire at that moment. But you have to decide, and almost always I find this is just some social conditioning nonsense that I am not letting go of, or that I don't even think or feel like that anymore. I have not even, but here it is there. In black and white it is there. It is something that I thought was very important and would make me happy, and today I realize it will actually be a nuisance. Cross it out. The most difficult things to let go are deeply painful experiences and experiences of love that made you happy very intensely for a while and then made you deeply unhappy. These are the two most. Deeply painful means physically painful. If you had a physically painful experience, you remember, because then you're not remembering just with your mind, even your body remembers, which is why illnesses become so important. And you meet people 10 years later after they had the illness, they are still on that rag. And then there is the other one, the anticipation of future demise and illness. Who knows if I will be here to see next Diwali? There are certain old people who get into that. And they've been doing that for 10 years and just basically making everybody around them miserable. So anytime I hear somebody say that, I say, please tell us how you want your funeral to be organized. We'll fulfill that. And you should see how they go up in flames. You want me to die. you were planning it out. You were making everybody miserable. I won't be here next Diwali. I thought we might as well organize. What kind of memorial do you want? What kind of creative? They wake up very fast. So people now know, don't get him to talk to these old people, because he'll just make their BP go up. So that is another matter. But again, you see, when they say that, it is not even a desire for death. It is a desire for attention. It is a desire for being told by others, no, you are valuable, you are needed. So I can understand that. I can feel that. They can't say, please value me, please need me, please tell me that I am relevant in your life. They can't say those things, so they say this thing like, I will not be here next Diwali. Who knows if I will be here next Diwali? That whole, it's quite sad. And again, it comes from that whole, and they are pressing that button. They are pressing that button very hard, that loss and pain imprint people more deeply than happiness and gain. Yeah, like the time few years back when the stock market used to fluctuate wildly. So that time is always very good for tarot readers, because these people I lost so much. And how much did you gain in the months before? They never ever see that. They never ever see that they made 3 times, 4 times, sometimes 10 times the initial investment, but that was not enough. They couldn't sell it and get out. They wanted now 50 times the investment. Then the money goes down. They still haven't lost any actual money. It's just the market has come down. So where they would have gained 10 times, now they're gaining only once. But they are looking at it as I have lost 90%. This is how deep the sense of loss impacts people, even if it is not a real loss. So when it is a real loss, like a relationship, a friendship, when it is a real loss of a parent or a child, you cannot blame people for feeling that. Yogis are regarded as very unfeeling people. They are not unfeeling people, they just see all these things in perspective. When there is a loss of a relationship or something, it's not the end of the world. It happens. People die. People go away. People outgrow each other. So that is regarded as being very unfeeling. Now that can't be helped because, see, what I find very extraordinary is about all this is, do people know how fragile life is? Do people know how fragile societies are? I find that most people, quite educated, successful people, have no idea that society can collapse in just about a decade. It doesn't even need that much time. If a disintegrative process is set in months, the whole thing can go to pot. And people live on this amazing expectation that nothing will change. And life is so precious and so fragile. Anything can happen, especially now as we are coming into second half of life. Every day that you wake up is one day that, and people don't get that. So they keep going back to this ideal scenario, this plan that they had for themselves, or this hope that they had for themselves, and they don't see that maybe what you're experiencing now is much better than any plan that you had with your limited consciousness. And by not appreciating what you have, tomorrow it could all be jerked away from you. Because you could just have a heart attack and die, you could just have an accident and die. And this is of course something that it's not anything new, even in the Mahabharata it is there. Yaksha Prashna, Yudhishthira is asked questions by the Yaksha. And the last question he asks him is, what is the greatest wonder in the world? And he says, every day hundreds of people are taken to Yamadeva and yet nobody thinks of his own death. Because the manner in which people just blank themselves out from oblivion, that I don't want to think about the fact that what I have, because if you start thinking about that everything is so fragile and so precious, you will be forced to live in a different way. Your vibration will automatically shift, which is why in so many yogic schools, the meditation on death, meditation on skull, meditation on decay, meditation on the funeral pyre, it's the fastest way to shift. You become so determined to extract the maximum value from what you have. Now it's a somewhat morbid method, so I don't it's not really very helpful, but the aghoras and all that, the begging bowl is a human skull. And some of them, the more richer ones and all that, they actually silver plate it and gold plate it and stuff like that, but it's a human skull. Because that sense of this can all be shut in 1 second, they don't want to lose that. And that is the reason why the Shiva has that human skull in his jata. If you look at the older forms of the Shiva sculptures, or the Nataraja or anything, there is always a human skull in the jata. For that same reason. So are people to be blamed for this? No, I wouldn't blame them. Given the overwhelming conditioning of society, given every input that comes from everywhere, from every direction, I wouldn't blame them. But at least those of us who are in some kind of spiritual process, we should shift this definition of authenticity from hardship to joy. We should shift this definition of authenticity and true experience from this pain and suffering. Because when we are unhappy about memories, we are betraying the joy, or we are betraying the possibility of the current moment. Because I've had to say this to many people. At this moment, are you suffering? Yes, you went through terrible times. You suffered physically, financially, in many emotionally. But at this moment, are you suffering? And trust me, they don't like you for asking them that question. They get very agitated. Because the entire self-definition has been that of a person who suffers, the person who has been hurt. Now, this is going to sound very cruel, but beyond a point, I don't put up with those people. I just tell them, if you like to hug your pain so much, I'm the wrong person, I can't help you. Because if you're physically suffering, if you're ill at the moment, you're going through some difficulty at the moment, that is one matter. But if it is just an endless reiteration of something that has happened in the past and you're refusing to let go, I'm not even saying let go. I'm only saying that is not what defines you. That is not the only thing that is going on in your life. So much wonder is taking place in your life, and they just will, it's like a resolute refusal to acknowledge that anything good is happening. Those people can't be helped. I have stopped trying also. That's your conditioning. You come back to me when you're willing to stop this. And of course there is a lot of issue with that. But then, like I said, all the songs are Bissy Shylock, Skylark, we teach Percy Bissy Shelley, Skylark, we teach our children. We look before and after and pine for what is not. Sincere is laughter with some pain is fraught. Our sweetest songs are those which tell of saddest thought. Yes, absolutely. He was a genius, so he understood it. And that is still, unfortunately, the default setting. It's such a terrible statement. The sheer horror of the statement is unbelievable. We look before and after and pine for what is not. Our sincerest laughter with some pain is fraught. Why? Why should your laughter have pain in it? We are the country where the Himalaya is said to be an attahasam of Shiva. It is a frozen outburst of laughter that Shiva gives. The Himalayas are the most sacred space on the planet. There is no energy like the energy of the Himalayas, and we are saying that is because God laughed. That is the laughter of God. That is the laughter of consciousness. At least we should not privilege these mindsets. At least for us, which is not to say that pain will not happen, which is not to say that heartbreak will not happen, but those should not define us. Of course those things will happen. We are also the country who married off that same Shiva of laughter to Kali, so we know very well. We know very well. But when I first saw that in Kalidasa, I was like, this is incredible. No other country, no other culture in the world has ever said a thing like this. The Himalaya is an attahasam of Shiva. Attahasam is that wild laughter, that It's like he was so full of joy that he just laughed. That outburst of laughter, and that's it. And that's the yogically everybody knows the Himalayas are the greatest vibrational place on the planet. So if that is true, at least in our personal interactions and in our personal what do we call journey, the most responsible thing we can do is to catch ourselves when we are privileging negativity, negative intensity. No. And it's that simple. It's, first thing I did was stop listening to all those Muni songs, all those old romantic. I mean, they're just awesome poetry, that was like the last peak of great poetry in our culture. But oh my God, the way they are conditioning you is just deadly. So I just stopped it. And no, this is not helpful. So sometimes when I'm in the mood, I start singing, and people are like, oh, this is a different aspect of my old Hindi romantics. Yeah, so desires are easier to fight with because we can understand, is this a transformatory desire or is this an accumulative desire? Memories are a problem. Memories requires a certain level of constant ongoing awareness. But then if you're doing any kind of yoga kriya, that is the foundation. So desires are very easy to deal with. Okay, this is just a futile transformative desire. The memory, yes. The memory becomes just because something is not easy is not a reason to stop doing it. That dialogue in that movie, A League of Their Own, Tom Hanks, Gina Davis. Why did you stop? It got too hard. It's supposed to be hard. If it was easy, everybody would do it. The hard is what makes it great. Exactly. That is a yogic line. That is a yogi speaking. I never ever forgot it. It was just something so incredibly true, and I'm like, oh wow. So yeah, it's hard, but the sooner we start doing it, the easier it will get for succeeding generations, because the more we shift our consciousness, that much consciousness shifts in the world. So we are the world. We have to do it. Yeah, memory is actually the core. Memory is actually the issue. And there are yoga, because it looks at all these things, it actually designed those memory meditations. It actually designed how, but like I say, now unless I'm sure that the person has been doing some kind of sadhana for a few years, I don't teach, because it simply doesn't catch. There are actually healing memory where you go back in time to that particular spot and you fix it. In time, we can start doing those things. It requires a certain level of psychological and yogic maturity before it catches, but it's possible. One does not have to be a prisoner of one's memories. One does not have to be conditioned or driven by one's memories. It's quite possible. Desires are actually very easy to find. The minute you understand, I'm in the game to transform myself, I'm in the game to grow as much as possible, desires become very easy to manage. Memories. So it was a big learning for me not to be dismissive of people. So it was very easy to dismiss people. But I understood there are too many obstacles for the normal human being to overcome. Yes? Sarvam Shomya.